Much has been made of the PS5 Pro and its specs for its price. Now, I thought to myself, what kind of a PC can you build for that same amount of money? And of course, as the PS5 Pro would be a new product, it would have to be a new PC. And could you build something that could compete with the PS5 Pro? Because at face value, it seems like a lot of money for a console, but as you dig deeper into the actual specs, I think you'll come to realize that perhaps it is not priced as badly as it first seemed to have been. And I was also one that sort of made this accusation in my previous video. I took a look at the specs and I took a look at the package, and I did say that it was overpriced. But if you take a look at the PC you can build for this money, and I'm talking of course new parts. Now, a second-hand PC would be a different story, and perhaps I'll make a video on that as well. But for building a new PC at that price range, which is $800 for the complete package, it's not as clear-cut as you think it would be. So let's take a look at, firstly, let's refresh ourselves on the specs of the PS5. So it has a Zen 4 CPU coming in at 8 cores with 16 threads. So that is, of course, DDR5 compatible. And this is a CPU that is relatively strong in terms of gaming performance, but it would even be strong as a productivity CPU. And with this, it also comes in with, of course, the new RDNA 3 GPU that is almost twice as capable as the old GPU on the PS5 normal edition. Of course, coming in with 20 gigs of GDDR6 unified RAM, so a little bit of an upgrade there from the 16 gigs that it had previously, running at a 320-bit bus in terms of bandwidth. Then for storage, it has 1.65 terabytes of storage, which is quite strange, but it is a Gen 4 NVMe SSD. And apart from that, it has some good Ethernet connections and stuff like that, but I'm not going to get into that kind of stuff too much now. We're just taking a look at the base specs and what you can do to challenge it. Now, I am based in South Africa, so I use South African websites, but I'll convert it to dollars more or less just to give you an idea for my overseas viewers. For building our own PC that is brand new, as for the chassis, I decided to go with the Montec Air 100. This is a chassis that I have built in before, and it's one that I really like for the price. Coming in at 850 Rand, this is just about $45. It has a lot of good features. It has some space for SSDs. It can take a decently sized power supply. It is quite plasticky, but for the price it does look relatively premium. And it does come with I think 2 fans as well. Yeah, 2 120mm fans, and these are non-RGB, but this isn't an RGB challenge. This is just seeing what we can build for the money. You can choose it in white as well, and overall I think it's a really good looking case. But for case, you can really just do whatever you want. It doesn't have to be anything specific, just whatever you think looks nice at a reasonable price. Here's a big one, the CPU. And this is where it starts to get complicated for challenging the PS5, because the PS5, of course, is a Zen 4 CPU that is running at 8 cores, 16 threads, and it does work with DDR5 memory. And this is where it becomes challenging, because here we have the 5th gen of AMD CPUs, Ryzen CPUs, and this one specifically is the Ryzen 5600. And when you buy new, this is the sort of thing, when you compare prices to the PS5 Pro, this is the sort of thing that you can sort of compare in terms of, in terms of money, in terms of making it a fair fight in terms of how much you're spending, because it wouldn't be a fair fight to the PS5 Pro if we went with an 8-core CPU that is more expensive than the one in the PS5, because we have to challenge it at the end of the day. So this comes in at 6 cores with 12 threads. So automatically it is a Zen 3 CPU, so it is older. It uses DDR4 memory, it doesn't use DDR5, and it is only 6 cores. So we are already losing a lot of processing power and performance as compared to the PS5. So that's a battle we lose in terms of the CPU. Now, again, you can push for an 8-core CPU, but then you have to sort of choose a worse graphics card, because that is the components where the money is, where the more expensive components. So to be realistic, a 6-core CPU is the one that we are going to go with. As for the CPU cooler, you can just take whatever. You could probably even just do the stock cooler that comes with the CPU, but I chose this one because I think it'll keep the CPU nice and cool, and it is not too expensive, coming in at about $20. Then the price for the CPU is 2,700 Rand, which is about $180 more or less. As for the motherboard, we are going with the Gigabyte A520MK V2 variant, and this is an A520 motherboard, and which means we will not be able to overclock the CPU, but you know, we can't overclock the CPU in a PS5 either, so I think it is a fair sort of comparison. This only has 2 DIMM slots, but you know, in a PS5 the memory is built in, and this does have one NVMe slot as well. So you can really just choose whatever is cheapest for you here, but for me, I need it to be small form factor to sit well in our case, and I need it to be relatively okay in terms of parts, so that it doesn't blow any capacitors when you try and use it. So overall, not a bad choice, but there are much better motherboards out there. Then moving on to the RAM, this is where debatable, but where we have a leg up on the PS5 in terms of capacity, because we are going for 32 gigs of RAM, but of course this is DDR4, so it's going to be a lot slower, coming in at 3200 megahertz. The PS5 is running at I'm not sure exactly what the speed is, it doesn't say because it uses unified memory, but the PS5 is going to run at about 6000 megahertz, so pretty much twice the speed, if you're being honest. But capacity is important in some games, especially big open world games and the kind of games that the PS5 likes to claim that it could handle well. So I do think in terms of memory, we do have it beat to some extent, but then in raw speed, the memory in the PS5 is a lot quicker, and some games will favor that. But if you're taking a look away from just the games, then you know the memory is important in another way as well. If you do want to look at doing things like content creation, or you know, administrative work or design work or production work. But again, I don't think that's a fair comparison to the PS5, because that's not what a PS5 is, and that's not what we're trying to achieve here. Moving on to the big one, the graphics card. Now, there's a lot of space for debate, but I've gone with the RTX 4060. It doesn't really matter which brand you go with or which look you go for, as long as it is capable in terms of cooling itself. But this is a lower TDP card. It doesn't pull quite as much power as some of the more advanced cards, and this one is, I don't like the 4060 very much, but I do think it's a good comparison. So it's going to be a little bit slower than the graphics performance of a PS5 Pro. A PS5 Pro is more or less a 4060 Ti, more or less. This will match it in some games, but it will be a little bit slower in other games. And this is sort of showing the purchasing power of a PS5, because a PS5 Pro, because having everything be unified and be sort of in one thing, one system, ready to go, it does save on money. Of course, building a computer is a whole different experience, and it's something that I think everyone should experience if they can afford to. But it's it isn't always the best choice to go with building your own thing, because in this case we are paying 6,600 Rand for the graphics card, which is about $380-400, and that's half the price of a PS5 Pro, which does have some really good graphics. I think it does have this card beat, maybe not by much, but it does have it beat. Now, of course, the other end of this is this card comes with so much NVIDIA AI upscaling technologies and resolution technologies, and your DLSS. It has RTX. Of course, the PS5 also has RTX. But in terms of just being able to do more with this, and in games being able to select more settings, being able to fine tune your performance and your experience, this of course takes the cake, because a PS5 you can change some settings, but it's not going to be the same. So that's what we've gone with for the card. Not quite as strong as a PS5 Pro's card, but definitely not way worse, if I can put it that way. Then for the power supply, it doesn't matter too much what you take at this price point. It just needs to be able to power your parts. So I know Deepcool is banned in America, but I just took one that I like, because this is the one that's in one of my systems as well, and it's a good power supply. But any 700 watt unit that is a name brand that you recognize honestly will do, as long as it is 80 plus to some capacity. So you don't have to think about that too much. Just go for whatever special you can, save a couple of bucks on it, and don't take the cheapest ones that you can find. But power supplies are reasonably good, and there are a lot of information, sort of videos and websites that you can go to see whether a power supply is good and whether a power supply brand is trusted. So just do a little bit of research on that, and it's not a big deal. But something like this, a 700 watt 80 plus white or bronze or whatever, it's going to do the trick just fine, because these are relatively low power draw components. You could even go 650 watts. Then for the storage, we have gone with the Mushkin Tempest 1 terabyte. Now this is only a Gen 3 NVMe drive, and the PS5 Pro does have a Gen 4 NVMe drive. So it does have us beat for speed and capacity, because we only have 1 terabyte. But of course, now this is true to the PlayStation 5 to some extent as well, because you can now add on storage. So it does have us beat there in both capacity and speed. We just have to take the L, unfortunately. And that kind of concludes the build. So we come up to 15,961 Rand, so 16,000, which is right about $880. So it's more expensive than the PS5, and it is honestly worse in every way. There's no, apart from obviously the case and the CPU fan and the power supply, things that can't really be quantified in a PS5. This comes down to personal taste. There is no way in terms of performance that this beats a PS5 Pro. Now, with that said, with that sort of quantifier out there, I would still take this. And the reason for that is that this allows you to do more. It allows you to do production work. It allows you to do productivity work, to do 3D modeling or audio design or video game design or administrative work or whatever. Now I know we're talking about games, and in gaming performance this isn't going to do as well. But on the other hand, a PS5 Pro is expected to run 4K TVs. This wouldn't be expected to run that. This would be expected to run 1K or 2K screens at the most. And even at 2K, you will be getting 60 FPS in most games, probably all games, bar like Starfield. But for me, I would still take this. I think it will look cooler than a PS5. It'll be something that you build yourself, and you'll just have more of a personal connection to it. Now, that's just how I feel. Not everyone will agree, but to be honest, the PS5 Pro has us beat in terms of performance. It's just what it is. In the next one, I'm going to do a second-hand build, and then we'll see if the PS5 Pro can hold up to that. I doubt that very much, but then of course you have the other side of it, the other side of it, which is that you have no warranties, and that's a whole different conversation. So yeah, what are your opinions? Do you think it makes sense to build a PC like this? Maybe save up a little bit more, get an 8-core CPU, maybe go for that next step in Ryzen and go for the Zen 4 architecture, but then you're talking about a lot more money. So the truth of the matter is, for the money, for the price, the PS5 Pro has us beat. Thanks for watching.